Like, no, don't change. Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. We're learning Maseches Kesubos, Daf Yud. We're starting 2/3 of the way down. We're actually really in the middle of a developing question on the Shita of Rabbi Yoshua. We have seen as a theme over the last many blocks that Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Eliezer on one side and Rabbi Yoshua on the other have they each follow their party lines. Rabban Gamliel, by and large, follows the Shita that a woman is ne'emenes, even when there's something conflicting against her, like a chazaka. And Rabbi Yoshua is more machmir to say that we really don't believe her. The Gemara here poses a question on Rabbi Yoshua. We're 2/3 of the way down on Yud Gimel Amud Beis at the words v'tepuk, last word on the line, v'tepuk. The tepuk lay, maybe we could understand Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Yoshua had said something that's really wild.
A little bit earlier than that, you didn't get to.
Mm-mm.
You didn't get Tani Mesa. You didn't even get to Suba.
What?
You skipped. Trust me, you didn't get to table play.
Where did we finish?
That's where I thought we finished. Where did I finish?
You finished at Arias.
At Katani Mihas? Oh, sorry. Okay, we'll go back just to finish up the last sugya. Thank you. Nice catch. Katani Mihas, the Gemara is referring to the Brisa that Tarte Midaberes Umeuberes, that we see that Midaberes and Meuberes, this was from the previous Machlokas. I'm sorry I didn't finish that up. Nice catch. Thank you. That in regards to yesterday's discussion about what the word Midaberes means. Does Midaberes mean Nivala or does Midaberes mean Nistera? Does Midaberes mean that he was alone with her? That's what Zeiri. Or the other Shita Ravasi, does Midaberes mean that they were Nivala? So the Gemara says that we learned in this Brisa both Midaberes and Meuberes, and that is Tiyuvta de Ravasi Tiyuvta. That's a rejection of the Shita of Ravasi, because according to Ravasi, who's of the opinion that Midaberes means Tashmish Amita, then there's no difference between Midaberes and Meuberes. Therefore, Tiyuvta, we reject the Shita of Ravasi and hold like Zeiri that the word Midaberes in the previous Mishnah means that they were Bistira, they were alone together, B'yichud, but nothing more. Thank you, Michael. And V'tepukle, one of the things that we should be asking on Rabbi Yoshua is that Rabbi Yoshua in the preceding Brisa held that a woman, this is a crazy shita, listen to this, that a woman who is a shavuya and a woman who is in yichud with another man have the same din. That's a big problem. Any woman who's ever been b'yichud ever, we assume that she is nivala. That's an unbelievable principle. We understand why a shavuya, we don't trust we don't trust the captors. That I understand. But if a woman is b'yichud and all of a sudden we assume she's a nivala, then any woman who's ever been b'yichud, or ksuba is not a ksubas masayim, it's a ksubas manam. Okay, so the Gemara says that if this is true, then why don't we make the following distinction? De Hassam by the Shivuyim rov psulin etzla, that most of the people who were with her were psulin, but v'hacha, when she was simply bestira, when she was alone with the man, rov ksher mesla. He doesn't make this distinction, Rabbi Yoshua. So the Gemara says because he doesn't make this distinction and he holds his line that a woman who is b'shvuya, who is a captive, and as well, a woman who is bestira, that they're the same, that's Mesayele, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. Damar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, L'divrei hamachshir, machshir afilu barov psulin. According to Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, when a person says that the woman is okay, we're also machshir her even barov psulin. And L'divrei haposel, posel afilu barov ksherim. And if we think that this woman is going to be pasel, she'd be pasel even if most of the people exposed to her were ksherim. That is the sheet of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. And how do we understand this machlokas one level deeper, not only about the woman herself, but also about her children? So the Gemara says about 15 lines from the bottom of Yud Gimel Amud Beis, Amar Rav Yochanan, L'divrei hamachshir ba, machshir babita. According to Rabbi Yochanan, and we saw this shita yesterday, that according to the one who says that we view the woman as a kosher still, we treat her daughter as a kosher, and l'divrei posel ba, and anyone who holds that the woman herself is psula, then posel babita, her daughter as well as psula. That's the sheet of Rav Yochanan as it relates to the daughter. The Rabbi Elazar disagrees. Omer l'divrei hamachshir ba posel babita. One who says that the mother is kosher would actually still say that the daughter is psula. So asks the Gemara in the sheet of Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabba, my time of Rabbi Elazar. Why is it that Rabbi Elazar holds that the woman herself may well be kosher, but the daughter is not kosher? So says the Gemara, because the woman herself is la chazaka de kashros. Up until this point, she had a chazaka her whole life of being a kshera. Masha'ein kain bita less la chazaka de kashros. The daughter has no chazaka. She's new. She doesn't have a preceding chazaka. So therefore, Rabbi Elazar says we have to treat the mother more leniently than we have to treat the daughter. The Gemara asks, Eisvei Rabbi Elazar, the Rabbi Yochanan. Remember, the Shita of Rabbi Yochanan just said that if we're machshir the mother, we're machshir the daughter. So the Gemara questions that from a brisa. When do we say this? That's be'edus isha begufa. That's when a woman is testifying about herself. Aval edus isha bebita divrei hakol havlad shtuki. We see that in this case that the daughter would be treated like a shtuki, which is against Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said whatever the din is with the mother, the same is with the daughter. Yet here we see in this brisa that we distinguish between the mother and the daughter. My lab, isn't it the case that when we say that she's a shtuki, that it's shtuki upasel? Doesn't it mean that she's a shtuki and she's going to be pasel? This is a kasha in Rabbi Yochanan, because again, Rabbi Yochanan said mother-daughter always have the same din in this case. Yet here we see that that's not the case, that the mother is fine, but the daughter's a shtuki and pasel. Says the Gemara, no, lo, she's a shtuki. She has an aspect of safek to her. However, she's still a kosher, shtuki v'kosher. Asks the Gemara, how do we have a case of shtuki v'kosher? Umi ika shtuki kosher. Do we have a case where there's an element of safek about this woman, yet still it's going to be that she's a kosher? Says the Gemara, it's definitely the case, and this is Kiddush Shmuel. What does Shmuel say? And this is a case we saw, I think, in previous Maseches. Yep, in Yeromos we had this. Says the Gemara, Da'amar Shmuel, 6-7 lines from the bottom. Asara Kohanim omdim, 10 Kohanim are standing. Upiresh echad mehem uba'al. One of the 10 Kohanim separated from the pack, and the woman doesn't know who she was with. Havlad shtuki. So the Gemara says that this Vlad is a shtuki. My shtuki. What does it mean that the Vlad is a shtuki? Ilema that we quiet, quote unquote, namely we don't allow her child to have access to nichse aviv. That we know is the case, pshita, because we don't even know who the father is. 10 kohanim, we know that the kid's a kohen, we just don't know who the father is, and the yerusha has to be clear. So therefore, it can't be that he's going to be getting nichse aviv. That can't be why we call this child a shtuki. Ella, 4 lines from the bottom, the Gemara says shemashtiken osami din kihuna, that when a child, granted, we know 100% sure he's a Kohen. However, he doesn't know who his father is. Oh, so that he knows he's a Kohen. He just doesn't know who his father is. Then he's really not a Kohen. D'chsiv, says the Gemara, last short line, what does this mean, that there's a covenant forever with Kohanim? This applies to a Kohen whose children are miyuchas acharav, that we know who the father is, and therefore we know that the child belongs to the father. Therefore, what do we see from here? That there is a case scenario where a person is a shtuki and a kosher. What is the case where a person is a shtuki and a kosher? Where a woman conceives from one of any 10 Kohanim when we don't know who it is. We don't know who the father is. That's a shtuki kosher. So Rav Yochanan's shita, we tried to ask on him and we answered. Says the Gemara, Hahu arus ve'arusa. So the asu l'kamei de Rav Yosef. This engaged couple shows up to Rav Yosef's base medrash. She's very pregnant, but she's an arusa. She should not be pregnant. That's usur. That's not allowed. So the Gemara says, what happened? They went to Rav Yosef. He amra minei. She says that she conceived from her arus, from the man she's engaged to. Vihu amar, I agree with you. On the top of Yadal and Manaf. You're right. Minoi, I am the father. Rashi, emes, mimenihu. I am the one who impregnated her, and we're engaged. We shouldn't have slept together. We did, and she's pregnant. So Amar Rav Yosef, why are you telling me? What's the question? So says the Gemara, obviously, Chada, first of all, the Hakamoda, he agrees. What's the Shiloh? The baby is his kid. Okay, you guys did an Isser Doraisa, you're not allowed to be together, but it's still his kid. But Odin, furthermore, even if we weren't sure whose kid it was, she'd still be Naaman. Why? Because Amar of Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Halacha Karaban Gamliel. And as we've seen as a theme, a thread permeating the last many blot, the din is that Rabban Gamliel is of the opinion that she's Naamanis. So even if he didn't say that, we'd still be Naaman. So says the Gemara, Rav Yosef was bugged out a little bit. Like, why are you even talking to me? Says Abaye, Amar Le Abaye. Abaye says to Rav Yosef, remember the relationship that Abaye was a Talmud of Rav Yosef. In this case, if the husband would, or I should say the arus, the betrothed man would not have agreed to her taina, if she would have said, I'm pregnant with his baby, and he would have said, no, you're not, you're pregnant with someone else's baby, in this case, would Rabban Gamliel have actually agreed with her? We know in general he says Na'amanas, but would he have actually said that here? After all, Shmuel says to Rav Yehuda, Shinana, bright one. We know that the halacha is Rabban Gamliel, but fa'at lo tavid uvda. You're not allowed to paskin like him. Adi karov ksher netzlav, hacharov psula netzlav. So here, most people are forbidden to her. Who are most people? She's an arusa. So most people in the world are forbidden to her. It says the Gemara, because most people are forbidden to her, and because called the parish meruba parish, we have to assume that she is pregnant from somebody else. So here the Gemara says that within Rav Yehuda that Rabban Gamliel is only true when it's Rov Ksherin. Here it's Rov Psulin. So it says the Gemara that that doesn't work. First of all, Ulata'amech, according to your own svara, by quoting this very complex line, that what does the Gemara say? Ulata'amech tikshilach higufa. What does it say? Halacha. Yes, the halacha is like Rabban Gamliel. Ve'ad lo tavid uvda. Which one is it? You said the halacha is like Rabban Gamliel, but you also added another din that wasn't Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel was of the opinion that she's ne'emenes no matter what she says. When she says that it's her baby, then it's her baby. And if she says that she's pregnant from person X, then she's pregnant from person X. And you're coming in and adding a qualification. Which one is it? Is it the halacha is like Rabban Gamliel? Or is it like what you're adding, which is that it's only like Rabban Gamliel with the qualification that it's Rov Ksher and Etzla? Says the Gemara, what must be the case? Says the Gemara, it must be that here we're dealing with a case of lechatchila and b'di'evet. Lechatchila we would want to paskin like Rabban Gamliel, but this is a case that's b'di'evet. Why is this case b'di'evet? So Rashi highlights that the reason why this case is b'di'evet is because if we don't believe her, then she has to divorce her husband, because that means she slept with somebody else, in which case asr lebal, asr lebo. So this is a case that's b'di'evet, so maybe we would still paskin like Rabban Gamliel. Says the Gemara, a third of the way down on Yodalad Amud Aleph, Rami le Abaye le Rabba. This should be Rabba, not Rabba. I think that's the correction here. Yes. So says the Gemara, Umi Amar Rabbi Yoshua Eina Ne'emenes. Remember, as we've been really speaking broadly about the shitas of Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Yoshua. We spoke about Rabban Gamliel. We'll speak about him more soon. But here, Rabbi Yoshua has a little bit of a built-in stira. We have said over the last many times, Rabbi Yoshua is of the opinion that Eina Ne'emenes, that a woman. What was Lomi Piha Anuchayin? It was a line that Rabbi Yeshua has used a number. We don't trust her. We just don't trust her in these scenarios. It says the Gemara, that's in general what he said, but does he really always say that? Ur Minhu. We have a Tanaic source which disagrees with this broad shita, Rabbi Yeshua, that she's not Ne'emenes. What is this shita?Heid Rabbi Yeshua, the person in discussion.Heid Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. There was a testimony given from these two greats of the Tanoim. Almonas Isa. And Isa, when I was listening to Rabbi Reznik's shiur, he said this line. He said, this is a throwback to Maseches Yevamos. What was the case of this Isa? An Isa is a man who is a suffix. So here's the case scenario. Let's say in the grandfather generation, you have Avraham. Let's do Rachel and Ruvain, just for old time's sake. You have Rachel and Ruvain, and they're married. Ruvain throws a get to Rachel, and we're not sure if it's Karav Lo or Karav La. We don't know where the get fell, and then he instantly died. So what's our suffix? We don't know if she's a Grusha or if she's an Almana. Say the case again. It's Ruvain and Rachel. Rachel gets a get thrown at her, and we don't know if it's closer to her, in which case she's divorced, or if it's further from her, in which case she's still married. And then he died. Is she a Grusha or is she Almana? The nafkamina marrying a regular Kohen. That's a huge nafkamina. So it says the Gemara, then a woman in the next generation marries, what's the case scenario? Oh, so then this, right, and then this woman, Rachel, gets married to another man and has a child, gets married to a Kohen and has a child because she thought that she was an Almana. That child is referred to as the Isa. So it says the Gemara, Almanas Isa, if there used to be a wife to that Isa, to that man who's a Safek Halal, she ksher lekahuna. Rabbi Yoshua seems to say that we trust her because she gave the Kula opinion that she said, no, it was closer to the other person, and then he died, which makes me an Almana. We trust her. So now we see that Rabbi Yeshua has a stira. Rabbi Yeshua has said throughout the last many blot that she is not Ne'emenes. Yet over here in the case of Almanas Isa, we see that she is Ne'emenes. So how does the Gemara answer that? The Gemara says almost halfway down, a third of the way down in Yodalad Amud Aleph, Amarle Hachi Hashta. The case of Almanas Isa and the case of our Mishnah are not comparable at all. Hasam, in the case of Almanas Isa, Isha Nisei's Bodekes V'Nisei, she's going to be very thorough. She's going to do a good job. She'll get out the yardstick. She's going to measure where the get fell, where she was standing. She'll properly determine what the din is. She's not going to mess around. She's a frum girl. However, Hacha, in the case where she was getting pregnant as an Arusa, of course he's not going to believe her. Because after all, Isha Mizana Bodekes Mizana. When a woman is about to be Mizana, she's like, wait 1 second, are you a Kohen? If she's not looking in, she's sleeping around. She's not looking into the halachic nuances of what his status is. So it says the Gemara, there's no stira within Rabbi Yoshua, because one case was with a frum woman and one case was with a non-frum woman. Amar Rava says that's great. Rabbi Yehoshua ad Rabbi Yehoshua kasha. It's great that you were able to discuss that and solve that. But the Rabbanan Gamliel ad Rabban Gamliel lo kasha. I'm glad that you asked a question about Rabbi Yehoshua and that you could answer. But there's also a stira within Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel broadly over the last many blot was of the opinion that a woman is ne'emenes. But over here we have a problem. Vakatani Seifa. We have another brisa, and the brisa says that Rabban Gamliel was not lenient on her. We didn't believe her. What did he say? The brisa reads, Amar lehen Rabban Gamliel kibalnu eduschem. We do accept your edus, except that we have one problem. We do trust women to say that to say whatever the status is of their husband or of their pregnancy. However, Aval manas sheri gazar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai shlo lahoshi based in al kach shakohanim shomen lekach lerachek avalo lekarev. That when it comes to the kohanim, nobody is going to look for the kula. That means that Rabban Gamliel, much as he may want to say that we trust her, Lemaisa, that it doesn't work out that way because Rabbi Yeshua ben Zakkai. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So therefore, we have a stira within Rabban Gamliel. So says the Gemara, Rava, really Rabban Gamliel, Rabban Gamliel Lokasha, Hasam Bari, Hachashema. The claims are very different claims. In one case where there's a claim of Bari, then if there's a claim of Bari, then Rabban Gamliel is always going to be Meko. And if there's a claim of Shema, then he will not be Meko. And that's how Rabban Gamliel would navigate the many blot we've learned and the many shitas we've seen. And we'll see how far this goes in just a moment. And Rabbi Yehoshua Nami Lokasha, we can answer another answer for Rabbi Yehoshua, even though we answered it once already. Hasam Chad Sveika. In regards to the case that we were learning earlier, there's only one sveika by almanas isa. We just don't know if she's a grusha or if she's an almana. But hacha trei sveike. Here, when we talk about the child of that person, it's trei sveike. It's actually not a svek sveika. The language here is meduyak. It's trei sveike because we're not sure about the older generation and we're not sure about the younger generation. We're not sure about Rachel in her first marriage, not first generation really. We're not sure about Rachel in her first marriage where she might have been an almana and she might have been a grusha. We're also not sure about the child that's born, if that child is a halal or not a halal. So therefore, even Rabbi Yehoshua could get out of it. Hilkach, le Rabban Gamliel, and this is where we see the lamdus of each shita. According to Rabban Gamliel, alim le bari, the claim of bari is very strong. See, normally when we have one element of suffix, that leaves us very concerned. But says the Gemara, that Rabban Gamliel is of the opinion that if you have a bari claim on one side, and a single suffix on the other, even though a single suffix is usually a room for concern, but says Rabban Gamliel, the power of a tainas bari is so strong that it knocks out a suffix d'Rabbanan, even a suffix d'oraisa l'chora, because this could be a chalal. Says the Gemara, doesn't matter. One tainas bari is stronger than a real suffix. That's shita number one. And says the Gemara, what about the second part of Rabban Gamliel? The keel le shema, a tainas shema, is so light. De'afilu b'sfek sveka nami pasum. Wow. Even if there's a sfek sveka, there's a double suffix, which in and of itself should have caused for the halacha to be one way. But the taina that she said was a tainas shema. Tainas shema has no veracity to it at all. So that's really powerful. The shita of Rabban Gamliel, let's just say it again. The shita of Rabban Gamliel is that when a person has a tainas bari, it even overrides a single suffix. And when a person has a tainas shema, they have an unsure claim, it doesn't even override a svek sveka. Fine. All that is Rabban Gamliel. It's 5-6 lines from the bottom. What about the Rabbi Yehoshua, who's been more negative and said that we don't believe her? So he says, Alim lechad sveka de'afilu b'bari nami pasal. He's the exact opposite, as it would be, of course, from Rabban Gamliel. Rabbi Yehoshua was of the opinion that if there's one suffix, even if you bring a tainas bari against it, the tainas bari is not as strong as the suffix. The kile svek sveka, and svek sveka is so light, de'afilu b'shema nami machshir. He would even be lenient, even if the only taina that was there was a tainas shema and it was up against the svek sveka, he would also be machshir. Good. So that gives us a little bit of clarity about the polarized shitas of Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Yehoshua, where Rabban Gamliel puts the taina above everything, and Rabbi Yehoshua puts the suffix above everything. Now the Gemara is just going to dig into, with some nuance, at the bottom of Yudal Amud Aleph, 3 lines from the bottom, the discussion about Almanas Isa. Remember the case that we discussed is Rachel is married to Ruvain, and he throws a get. We're not sure if the get is closer to her, in which case she's a grusha, she's divorced, or if the get is closer to him, in which case she's not divorced. And then when he drops dead, she becomes an almana, not a grusha, we don't know. Then she marries another kohen, and the Maisa, they ended up having a child. Is that kid a halal or is that kid not a halal? If in fact she was a grusha, So then she can't marry a Kohen, the kid's a halal. And if not, not. So it says the Gemara, Tan Rabban, Ezohi almanas Isa. What is this strange unicorn of a space of an almanas Isa, where we have a real suffix of whether or not she's a halal, and she's still a kosher? So it says the Gemara, how do we define an almanas Isa? Kol she'ein ba, as long as this person doesn't have any of the following features: lo mishum mamzerus, lo mishum nesinus, lo mishum avdei malachim. Any of these three categories. Yes, she slept with someone who was a suffix halal. That's true. Well, I should say she slept with someone who's a suffix grusha, so that's true. But the person's not a mamzer, the person is not a nasin, and the person's not an eved melech. That's the shita of the Tanna Kama. Now, when we see the next words, Amar Rav Meir, we would have assumed that we had the Tanna Kama, now we're seeing a new shita. So let's see how different Rav Meir is from our shita. At the top of Yodal Amud Beis, we'll be going until the Mishnah 10 lines from the bottom. What does the Rav Meir say? Shamati, kol she'ein ba'echad mikol elu. I heard, says Rav Meir, that anyone who doesn't have any of these three features, namely mamzerus, nasin, or avdei melech, from the bottom of the previous page, then masin lekuna, they can still get married. And Rashi calls it out on the spot that this is Hainu Tanna Kama. It's very same exact shita. And then we see still a third shita, but in the name of Rav Meir. Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer Mishum Rav Meir, v'chein hay Reb Shimon ben Menashe Omer Kidvarav. These two Tanoim said in the name of Rav Meir, Ezo hi almanas Isa, kol shenitma ba safek halal. He defines an almanas Isa not by omission, not by saying that they simply aren't a mamzer, a nesin, or an eved melech, but to say that they have a mixture in them of a halal. That's the case of almanas Isa. The Brisa continues with a somewhat of a cryptic line. Makir in Yisrael mamzerim shebeneim. The Jews always know who the mamzerim are. This isn't a metaphor. This isn't a hyperbolic comment. It's not meant to be insulting. We actually know who the mamzerim are. And they can only marry one another. And we always know that they're off limits. It says the Gemara, we always know who they are. However, ve'ein makir and chalalim shebeneim. But it's not as well known as to who the chalalim are. I remember when I was a kid that one of my friends' parents got divorced and the mom married a Kohen. They didn't have any more kids, but she was mamish a grusha, and she mamish married a Kohen. And if they would have had a kid, the kid would have been a chalal doraisa. I don't know what that means. The Maisa, did they not get aliyahs? I don't know how. They're done. Yeah.
You get so.
Huh?
You get so.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, they didn't have kids, so as far as I know, but that stuff should not be happening. And that's the Brisa. The Gemara here is bothered by so many things in the Brisa. Let's jump right in with a whole host of questions. Omar Mar, what did we say in our Brisa? We had said, we're 6 lines down, Yodal Amud Beis, Ezohi almanas Isa. What we had said initially, the Tanna Kama had explained that Kol she'ein ba lo mishum mamzeres, lo mishum nesinus, lo mishum avdei malachim, that we can define this relationship, the almanas Isa, where Rachel married a grusha and then had a child, and this child is safek halal, that as long as this safek halal doesn't have the status of mamzerus, nesinus, or avdei melech, we're good to go. Ha-halal kosher, that implies that the halal is kosher, because as long as you don't have any of these three features of mamzerus, nesinus, or avdei melech, you're good to go. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. Why is it that we're separating out a mamzer, a nasin, and an avdei melech, an eved, where those are doraisa? Chalal nami doraisa. If what you're saying is that the reason why we have said that an almanas Isa is different because it's not a mamzer, not a nasin, and it's not eved melech, those are doraisa, but a chalal is mutter. Why is a chalal mutter? I don't understand. Why would a chalal be kosher? The person could be a chalal. That's a big problem. So says the Gemara, that's question number 1. Question number 2, in Visu, and furthermore, and this was something I've already foreshadowed, the Brisa reads at the bottom of the bottom line of the previous page and the top line of this page, Omar Mar, Amar Rabbi Meir, Shamati, Kol she'ein ba echad mikol elu masin lekahuna. We also have seen that if a person doesn't have mamzerus, nesinus, or avdei melech, that they're mutter. Hainu Tanna Kama, it's mamish the same exact shita. So if you look back at the Brisa on the bottom of Yudal Amud Aleph, wrapping over to the top of Yudal Amud Beis, it's nearly impossible to distinguish between the shita of the Tanna Kama and Rav Meir. They're both saying the same thing, that a chalal is kosher because as long as they're not a mamzer, nesin, or eved melech, they're good to go. So that's the second question we're going to have to answer. Visu, and furthermore, still says the Gemara. The Gemara quotes the Brisa from the top of this page, from line 2. We're a quarter of the way down. What does it say? It says, Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer Mishum Reb Meir b'chein hay Reb Shimon ben Menashe Omer kedvar ve'ezu almanas Isa. What is almanas Isa? Kol shenit ma ba savek chala. And then the Gemara says this line of Makir and Yisrael Mamzerim Shebenein, Vein Makir and Chalal and Shebenein. And this Shita of Rav Meir, through the lens of Reb Shimon ben Manasseh and Reb Shimon ben Elazar, seems to say that an Almanas Isa is a Chalal. However, the Ha'amris Resha Chalal Kasher. I don't understand. Is the third Shita here arguing against the Tanna Kama to say that a Chalal is not kosher? What is going on here? So these are the three questions. Question number one is, why is Chalal different than Mamzeris, Nisin, and Eved Melech? Those are all Dorai, so it should be a Psul. Why isn't Chalal a Psul? Question number two is, isn't Rav Meir Hainu Tanna Kama? And question number three is, what's going on with the end of this Brisa where we seem to be completely rejecting the Tanna Kama? And the Gemara gives a lengthy, multi-stepped answer, which will basically bring us to the Mishnah, and then we'll stop. Amar Rav Yochanan, Mamzer Tzoveach, B'chalal Shosek Ika Beinayu. The difference between Rav Meir and the Tanna Kama is when we call a person a mamzer, a halachic mamzer, not a social mamzer. But when we call a person a halachic mamzer, he's tzoveach. What? Well, what phrase did I invent? Oh, that just fell out of my mouth. I didn't even think about it.
Sorry.
No, but I just don't want it to be like I want it to be like the actual halachic. Halachic. Let's just call it a halachic. Forget the other phrase. Sorry, I didn't even realize I said it until you called it out. Thank you. And when you it doesn't happen from Stamford, Connecticut. It only happens in the room, or nobody calls me out on it in Stamford. Thank you.
Well, we're all muted.
True story. So says the Gemara, if a person calls someone a mamzer and they're tzovech, they say, no, I'm not a mamzer. Okay, so that's one thing. What about v'chalal? You're a chalal and he's shosek. It says the Gemara, Ika Beinayu, that's the difference between the Tanna Kama and Rav Meir. How so? Tanna Kama Savar, the Tanna Kama is of the opinion, Kol Pasal to Karule V'Shasik Pasal, anyone who we think is a pasal, and we call him out on being a pasal, and he stays silent. Here we employ the well-known principle of Shtika Keoda. Your silence is your psak, and because I called you a halal and you said nothing, you're a pasal. Achi Kamar, Tanna Kama is saying like this. Ezohi almanas Isa. We had said, who is an almanas Isa? Kol she'ein ba lo shesuk mamzerus, v'lo shesuk nesinus, v'lo shesuk avdei melachim. They weren't quiet at all. V'lo shesuk chalal. They weren't quiet, and they're good to go. That's not true. I disagree with you that if a person is not silent about their halal status, that's not correct. If a person is silent, they're totally fine. They're a kosher. That's not the psul. And when it says you want to call me a halal, I really don't care what you call me. I'm a big boy. I got thick skin. You're wrong, and I'm a kosher. He doesn't care. So that's why Rav Meir and the Tanna Kama argue about what would happen with the silence of a halal. Is the silence of a halal shtika kilda or not? That's a machlokas Tanna Kama and Rav Meir. And then what's the next part of the brisa on the second line of this page, and quoted here as well, almost 2/3 of the way down? The Ka'amar le Reb Shimon ben Elazar le Tanna Kama. The Reb Shimon ben Elazar, this was after Rav Meir had died. So they said to the Tanna Kama, I don't understand. The Rav Meir, if you're trying to say that Rav Meir was going to be matir when someone was silent, it wasn't about the halal that Rav Meir said, that lo dekaru halal v'shasik. Rav Meir does not hold that way. If a person is a halal and he's quiet, that's not where he's going to be matir. Ela dekaru le mamzer v'shasik. If a person says to another person, I think halachically you're a mamzer, and he's quiet, v'hai d'shasik savar mamzer kala isla. He said, if you're calling me a mamzer, it means you have an element of doubt. Otherwise, you would just tell everyone, don't marry this guy. But if you're coming after me to say that I'm a mamzer, that means that that's how the Rishonim explained it, that you think that I'm not a mamzer, you're not sure. So therefore, I'm like, hey, great, he's not sure I'm a mamzer. At least I can marry into the kahal. Because the halacha is by a mamzer that only mamzer vaday amar rachman of lo mamzer safek. A mamzer vaday is not allowed to marry into Klal Yisrael, but a mamzer safek is allowed to marry into Klal Yisrael. So it says the Gemara, V'hai de ishtik, the reason why he was so quiet, V'hai d'shasik savar mamzer kala isla. He said that people would have known if he was a mamzer. If you're calling me a mamzer, then you're not sure that I'm a mamzer. Aval mamzer b'tzoveach chalal, mamzer b'tzoveach chalal v'shosek pasal. But he is of the opinion, Rav Meir would be of the opinion that a chalal v'shosek would be pasal. And and he was just thrilled that he wasn't excluded from the kahal. And then just lastly, two brisas that contradict one another, and then we'll see how this ties together with the beginning of this sugya. Tanichada, one brisa says, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Shasuk mamzer, if a mamzer is called out and he's quiet, kosher. Shasuk chalal, pasal. And if a chalal is called out to be a chalal and he doesn't respond, so then he's pasal. The Tanya Yidach, the exact opposite, that shasuk chalal, that if a chalal is called out and he's quiet, kosher. And shasuk mamzer, pasal. So how do we work out all of these shitas? The two brises are perfectly opposite one another. So it says the Gemara, lo kasha, hatanakama, aliba de Reb Meir, Reb Shimon ben Elazar, aliba de Reb Meir. As we clearly see, the Tanakama and Reb Shimon ben Elazar understood Reb Meir very differently. According to one of them, when a chalal is quiet, he's dead in the water. And according to the other one, when a chalal is quiet, he's totally kosher. We'll stop right here. In Yirtzeh Hashem, tomorrow night, we'll learn a blot and a half, Daf Tes Vav and Daf Tes Zayin Amud Aleph. And is that right? Tomorrow's Thursday. Okay, great. All right. Wishing you all a beautiful night.